we are introduced to a little girl running in the woods, presumably escaping from a pursuer. As she stops to catch her breath, she feels the presence of someone following her getting stronger. Petrified, she runs and hides beside the bark of a tree, which has jars filled with what seems to be blood hanging from its vines. As the little girl, later revealed to be named Heather, lies down and balls up by the tree stump, she hears a faint whisper call her name before feeling someone standing above her. A silhouette of someone tall appears and again whispers the girl's name, Heather. As Heather looks up, she screams at the top of her lungs. The scream transitions from Heather screaming to a teenage boy, Peter McAllister, after being hit by a sticky dart arrow. This is during a lesson with the kids at Camp Brierbrook. We learn that Heather had a flashback. A montage shows kids running around the camp. They're swimming, boating, doing challenging courses, and overall having a ton of fun. As the montage ends, Peter gets on the PA system to announce that the yearly goodbye ceremony is now in order. Everyone has to appear there. Peter is portrayed as a carefree and spoiled teenager who routinely likes to pull pranks around the campsite. His announcement is no exception. He exclaims that there is a witch in the woods, waiting to obliterate the kids who fail to show up for the goodbye ceremony. As Peter is sharing a kiss with his girlfriend, Lauren, in the camp office, his brother Shawn barges in. Shawn demands Peter to meet him outside, where he shouts at him for the prank he pulled. Peter asks if Shawn reported the prank to their mother, but Shawn denies it, wanting Peter to grow up. As the montage continues, an older woman, who is also part of the camp staff and the McAllister family, addresses the kids at the camp hall. She indicates that there is a surprise tableau lined up for the goodbye ceremony's entertainment. The woman is Heather, the little girl from the starting flashback of the film. The show begins, with kids putting on a great performance and Pete and Lauren arriving late. Pete goes over to Dan to find out if today is the day he will finally ask Kelly out, as Dan has a huge crush on her. Dan is insecure and refuses to give a proper response. The goodbye ceremony ends with a round of applause. Gilbert McAllister, Heather's father and founder of Camp Brierbrook, shows up to deliver a parting speech that makes everyone emotional. As time passes and kids start leaving for their houses, it's not long before only the last bus is left. Shawn is driving the bus. He complains to his mother about Pete still being an irresponsible, happy-go-lucky kind of man, and that it's high time for him to step up considering Gilbert is retiring. Heather is shocked, as she is unaware of her father leaving the camp for good. She has a conversation with him where he explicitly states that he has dedicated a significant part of his life to Brierbrook. It's time for him to pass the reins to the next generation of McAllisters. That night, all the camp staff are seen having a farewell party. Following camp tradition, they're drinking, laughing, and having a great time. Pete is seen ingesting illegal substances, and his girlfriend reprimands him for doing so. But he shrugs her off and goes on to the campfire. There, staff members and others are gathered. He addresses them about an old camp legend. The legend narrates that there used to be a nurse who worked at camp 42 years ago. Her name was Agatha, and she was banished from the camp when her homeopathic remedies got a little too out of hand. Soon after, Agatha started giving medicine lessons to campers right under the camp administration's nose, deep under the woods. When confronted by a counselor, she ran away and tripped on a rock. Her head split open and she passed away right there in those very woods. Soon afterward, her students gathered to form a circle around her and chanted Ex vitam immortalem. This phrase translates to immortal life, and her spirit has been said to wander the woods ever since. Peter and the team have been trying for a long time to summon Agatha's spirit, so they devise a plan to prick their fingers with needles, point them to the sky, and shout Agatha's name. This way, she'd have something to heal, since she's a nurse and helping those in pain was her passion. The gang goes through with this plan but sees no result. Dylan scares everyone by jumping on Peter with a mask, which earns him an insult from everyone. Meanwhile, in the middle of nowhere, Shawn's bus has stalled. All the kids fuss about going home, leaving Shawn visibly mentally exhausted and confused. He shushes the kids but is ignored. All of a sudden, silence spreads throughout the van. As Shawn looks to the back of the van over his shoulder, he is amazed to see all the kids in an inanimated state and completely disciplined. Impressed by their observance of pin-drop silence, he climbs down the van to pop the hood. Unfortunately, he is pushed back by the boiling water coming from the radiator. He instantly closes his eyes as a reflex from the water and opens them to see that the kids have vanished into thin air. Shawn can't believe his eyes, so he climbs back up to the cabin and sees no one is inside the van. He shines his searchlight but is unable to find a single trace of Dennis or any of the other kids. Uttering a profanity out of pure shock, he struggles to process what just happened to the kids. This is when he hears distant laughter and Camp Brierbrook chants coming from the surrounding cornfields. He calls out to the kids but to no avail. In his continued effort, he delves deeper and deeper into the fields. Back at the camp, Danny finally has enough motivation to confess to Kelly while she skips stones right by the lake. Peter, Lauren, and V cheer him on as he approaches Kelly, wanting to show her how it's done. He grabs Kelly's arm and teaches her how to correctly throw a stone so that it would skip water. Finding his window, Danny leans in to kiss Kelly, but he soon learns that she has already been seeing someone back at Dartmouth, her school. This makes the whole ordeal very awkward and Kelly walks back over to the campfire where she is greeted and offered a drink by Lauren. She denies the drink and shares with Lauren how serious things are with her Dartmouth boyfriend. Simultaneously, Dan approaches slowly from the background, Just when Kelly turns to face him, he starts bashing her head in with a sharp rock until his clothes are stained with Kelly's blood. Lauren rushes to help, but Dan heaves her away, leading Peter to jump into the fight as well. Peter punches Dan in the face, who is not in his senses. Veronica hits Dan with a log on the head with full force, but surprisingly, it has no effect on him, as Dylan pushes himself and V away from Dan. With bloodshot eyes, Dan turns towards V and Dylan. But then, Mondo Mike, another staff member of the camp, stabs him in his lower back with a shard of broken glass. Even this does not affect Dan, as he immediately swings his elbow toward Mike. Mike dodges and pulls the shard out before stabbing him once again. This causes Dan to puke out curdled blood and cry in pain. He finally collapses. An eerie silence falls over everyone as they're all trying to comprehend what they just witnessed. Dylan shouts at Mike for stabbing and murdering Dan. Mike and Peter decide that they need to let Heather and the relevant authorities know about what has happened. So the group travels back to the camp hall and debriefs Heather about the situation. Heather initially shrugs all of this off as one of Peter's newest pranks, but upon Dylan and Mike's persuasion, decides to call the police. Right as she dials the call, the phone goes up in a blast which takes off half her ear, leaving her right ear bloody and ringing. Extremely confused by what is going on, the group decides to locate Ben and Ashley. They're the only two counselors who were not present at the beach when the incident happened, as they went down to break the bunk beds. Peter and Lauren head to the intercom and infirmary to get gauze and bandages for Heather's ear. Dylan, V, and Mike decide to look for Ben and Ashley on the south side, where they last said they were going. Dylan is furious at Mike, and they both get into a tussle which is broken up by Heather, arguing that now is not the time for a fight. Elsewhere, Shawn, panting and running, locates a store with a payphone. He calls Gilbert to inform him about the occurrence of the ritual, indicating that Peter tried to do it before but failed. Gilbert instantly sets out to get there. Lauren reaches the infirmary to look for the medical supplies. As she walks towards the boxes labeled first aid, the miniature soccer game behind her starts moving all on its own. Remaining completely oblivious to cope, she opens a random box she finds. This reveals Agatha Wood's medical journal from 1945. At the beach, V, Dylan, and Mike look for Ben and Ashley and stumble upon Dan and Kelly's bodies. Dylan, envious of Mike for a long time, picks up the murder weapon, not a broken shard of glass but a switchblade knife, and tucks it in under his belt buckle. Deep in the southern campers' accommodations, Ben and Ashley prepare to dismantle the bunk beds. Ben goes in one shack, while Ashley goes in the other. As Ben starts working on a bed, the door opens and slams shut almost 3 times. Ben stares at the door under the impression that it's the wind. To his surprise, the door opens and closes right in front of his eyes without any wind. He opens the door to find Ashley, who mocks him for being a scaredy cat. The light flickers unexpectedly and Ashley blames it on faulty wiring, while Ben puts some electrical tape on an exposed wire. They hear Pete's voice on the intercom, urging them to rush back to the camp hall. They ignore it as they figure Pete is trying to get them to pay for the pizza and carry on. Mike and the team walk through the woods toward the southern camping site. Then, Mike and Dylan have a mild altercation, which is the result of Dylan wanting Veronica to sleep with him. The encounter escalates quickly. Dylan accuses Mike of ruining his chances with V, and before you know it, both of them are wrestling on the ground. They're throwing punches at each other and Dylan is just about to pull out the knife when they hear V's scream coming from the nearby trees, so they rush to her aid. Still pleading to Ben and Ashley to come back, Peter almost sheds a tear as Lauren walks into the intercom room. She reveals the old medical records she found in the box in the infirmary with a file titled Heather McAllister. Peter refuses to believe that Agatha's first victim was his mother, and keeps denying the fact that Agatha exists. He insists that she is nothing more than a campfire legend started so children would go to sleep. Lauren reminds him that she had reservations about doing the ritual in the first place, but Peter is adamant about proving his point. Heather walks in and explains the story of Agatha to her son and his girlfriend. When Heather was little, Agatha told her that she was a very special girl. This was because she could withstand her special experimental treatments like bloodletting, which is extracting blood from a person's veins in a horrific and painful manner. Heather tried to forget all these memories, and repressed all of them in a dark corner of her mind up until today. Hearing Agatha's name brought back all those ungodly memories right before her eyes. It is also confirmed in the scene that the little girl in the beginning was the same Heather, running from Agatha. Wanting to investigate Veronica's blood-curdling scream, Dylan and Mike find themselves in the same place with jars hanging from the trees. They discover a body stationed on what seems to be a morgue-like table, covered with a cloth. As they remove the cloth, they are both astonished and petrified to see V underneath. She's covered in an excessive amount of blood and obscenely violent bruises from head to toe. They let out crying screams, and so does the woman on the table. As she screams, blood clots form in her mouth and she perishes. We start hearing a very creepy tune of numerous children laughing, giggling, and chanting Camp Brierbrook coming from the trees. They decide to make a run for the mess hall. As sirens blare at the mess hall, Peter, Heather, and Lauren walk out to welcome Jerry, an officer from the local county sheriff's office. Jerry inquires about the situation and calls for backup from his car radio after he is told of the murder. Mysteriously, all the electronics of his car get cut off all of a sudden, making it impossible to contact headquarters. So he walks out to stand with Heather, reminiscing about old camp times. Meanwhile, Lauren has finally had enough and lashes out at Peter for wanting to do the stupid ritual that started the mess in the first place. Mike and Dylan emerge from the woods, panting and covered in V's blood, declaring that she has perished. Lauren talking about the ritual, and Mike and Dylan's condition of pure terror is enough for Jerry to connect the dots that this is Agatha's doing. He then experiences severe PTSD flashbacks of getting tortured by Agatha, revealing that he was her victim too. Jerry hyperventilates and wants to leave the camp as soon as possible. To their relief, the pizza they ordered arrives, as the pizza guy was supposed to honk 3 times to signify he is there. Dylan and Mike rush towards the pizza guy's car and demand for him to get out. When he doesn't cooperate, Dylan tries to pull him out through the window. Jerry fires 2 shots in the air and demands the delivery driver to get out. As soon as the driver gets out, Jerry handcuffs him and shoves him in the back. He gets into the driving seat himself while Heather begs him to send help. But Jerry doesn't want to suffer more, so he outright refuses and drives off. Walking in the thick dark woods, Ben and Ashley hear the shots Jerry fired. They assume that these are the fireworks Mike and Pete were planning to release in the air to make their last day at brierbrook special. They hear children giggling and running around them all of a sudden. This terrifies them because this part of the woods is supposed to uninhabited. They pass it off as hallucinations. But soon, a girl brushes past Ben's leg and heading to the tree where Agatha's corpse is rumored to be laid to rest. Meanwhile, all the kids who disappeared from Shawn's band start emerging and rallying at the tree. They form a circle, hold hands, and chant the infamous words said to be Agatha's summons, which is Ex Vitam Immortalum. As the kids continually do this, it's not long before Agatha's undead body emerges from the tree's roots and into the air. She is dressed in tattered nurse scrubs, with pale and bruised skin, and a stench so bad that it would be enough to make people nauseous. Ben and Ashley are out of words and start running in the opposite direction. Ashley messes up by accidentally saying Agatha's name. Agatha points towards Ashley and the kids hunt her down, repeatedly smashing her face in the dirt. They tear her body to shreds. Ben is out of breath but keeps running to preserve his life while crying and screaming for help. He comes out of the tree line right beside the mess hall, with the possessed children close behind him. The children attack the team, and Dylan smacks a child in the face before rushing into the mess hall to keep the kids out. Once inside, Heather explains that the kids have been possessed by Agatha's spirit. They are now her pawns who will hunt everyone down who has said Agatha's name or has the power to send her to hell, as she yearns for immortality. The children keep beating on the windows of the mess hall. Mike, convinced that they will break in at some point, comes up with a plan. He proposes that he run outside and lead the mob of children from the loading docks to the basement. They could be locked there until things can settle down. Peter wants to take responsibility for his actions and possibly atonement for what he has caused, so he volunteers to lock the basement door once Mike has let the kids in. Heather gives Mike a baseball bat and instructs him to use it only as a last resort. They put the plan in motion, and Mike runs out and shouts at the kids. They pour toward him and chase him down with superhuman-like agility. Determined to make this plan work, Mike runs as hard as he can. Once he is out of sight, Peter rushes to the basement door. As the kids are chasing Mike, one of them, a cripple named Tommy, starts falling behind a little bit. As Mike nears the basement, Peter is visibly shaking and is overcome by extreme dread. He manages to open the door at the very last moment and hides under a tarp. Once all the kids are inside, he locks the door and sits down to let out a sigh of relief. As he looks up, Tommy throws down his sticks and starts chasing Peter. He hides under a bush and watches Tommy sniff and leave in the distance. He exhales in relief when a pale hand reaches for him from the dark and touches his hair while slowly whispering his name. Traumatized, Peter flees to the mess hall. The kids have finally caught up to Mike in the basement. He is about to go through the door and into safety. As he is on the last stair, one of the kids nicks him on his thigh, leaving him bruised. Handicapped, he tries to reach for safety, but Dylan, in an act of unruly selfishness, kicks him down the stairs and slams the door. He further barricades it with benches on the other side to prevent breach. Peter arrives, ravaged by fear, and announces in sheer pure terror that Agatha touched him. He believes that she is real now, before being jumped by Tommy, who starts suffocating him. Peter fights back but is no match for Tommy's supernatural strength. Gilbert and Shawn arrive at camp in their truck. Gilbert shoots at Tommy, sending him scurrying away to the nearby bushes where Agatha is standing. Agatha and Tommy retreat into the wilderness. Peter lashes out at his family for not letting him know that Agatha was real, so he would not have done this in a moment of pure stupidity. Gilbert takes all of them inside to explain the backstory of how things got to the point they are at. 42 years ago, when Gilbert's wife Evelyn was on the verge of her final sickness, no remedy could heal her. One day, Agatha arrived in response to the ad for a camp nurse, determined to treat Evelyn. As Evelyn's condition worsened, so did Gilbert's state of mind. At his lowest point, Gilbert slept with Agatha, hours before his wife passed away. Gilbert slowly realized that Agatha was obsessed with him. The remedies she gave Evelyn were not medicinal but rather poisonous. Her motive was to get Evelyn out of the way so she could be with Gilbert once and for all. Realizing this, Gilbert banished Agatha from brierbrook. Afterwards, she dwelled right at the boundaries to lure at night and collect their blood in jars, which she then hung on top of a tree. When Gilbert found Heather that night, he finally snapped. In a fit of rage, he murdered Agatha. He buried her at the lowest point in the woods so she wouldn't bother the family anymore up until Pete's ritual summoned her back. In the present, Dylan drags Ben to the blood jar tree. He wants sacrifice him to Agatha as he believes she needs a virgin to be set free. He ties Ben to the tree, demanding him to say Agatha's name as he holds a knife to his jugular vein. Ben refuses, so Dylan cuts his hand up, forcing him to shout Agatha. Dylan kisses Ben and runs back to Gilbert's truck. He tries to start the engine, but it stalls repeatedly. As he gets out of the truck to look for the fault, he finds that the fuel lines have been cut. He senses that someone is pouring fuel onto him. He turns around to see Dennis, a kid he hated, trying to kill him. Dylan cusses at him right when Dennis throws a lighter on him, setting him ablaze. Seeing Dennis aflame, Lauren rushes out with a fire extinguisher to put the fire out. However, Dylan has suffered severe untreatable burns and requests everyone put him out of his misery. Lauren then questions him about her brother's whereabouts. In response, Dylan fondles Lauren's breasts and laughs maniacally, forcing Lauren to bash his head using the same fire extinguisher. A silence falls over Camp Brierbrook. Gilbert, Shawn, and Heather prick their fingers to view Agatha, who is corporeal now, having touched Peter. Gilbert explains that Agatha is after Evelyn's old wedding ring. Gilbert snatched it off Agatha's corpse because she had stolen it from Evelyn, creating a paradox for eternity. They come up with a plan to lure Agatha using a fake ring so they can destroy her. Heather and Gilbert go to the beach to serve as bait for Agatha. Shawn, Peter, and Lauren walk across the woods from the other side to the beach. At the tool shed, Peter hears Ben's cries for help. He is begging them to rescue him, claiming that Agatha is right in front of him. Peter gives in and decides to go help Ben. Running towards what seems to be Ben's voice, Agatha impales Peter in the neck with an axe head. Devastated, Peter succumbs to his injuries and expires. Back at the beach, Gilbert shouts for Agatha to reveal herself and take what she wants. He calls out for Heather but receives no response. He turns around to see Agatha, holding Heather hostage with an axe to her head. Gilbert asks Agatha for her hand so she can have the ring. Agatha hesitantly complies until she realizes that the ring is a fake. Gilbert kicks her and catches Heather. Agatha manages to get hold of Gilbert's shotgun and shoots him in the head. Shawn, armed with a hammer, strikes Agatha's leg, forcing her to fall. Agatha laughs devilishly in response to Lauren asking her to bring everyone back. Lauren shoots an arrow right through Agatha's airway, ending her once and for all. Streaks of sunlight begin to cover the horizon, and the nightmare is finally over for the McAllister family and friends. However, not all of them have survived. Heather commands Shawn and Lauren to cut Agatha's body up and throw the pieces in the lake. Ben arrives with a police officer, who thinks Ben did a prank call and asks if they have been partying all night. Upon seeing Kelly and Dan's lifeless bodies, the policeman is shocked, and the story ends here.